One of the lesson content types we'll be covering this week is the assessment. If you've used Angel with versions before 7.2, you're familiar with the quiz. The assessment is coming out with 7.2 and 7.3 and replacing the quiz, and it gives you some new options. Both are automatically graded or manually graded quiz or assessment options. If I go to the lessons content and I go to the location where I want the assessment to be, say in this folder, and I click Add Content, one of my content types that I can choose is the assessment. Now, similar to other lesson content, when I add a new piece, I have a series of tabs across the top here where I can specify things. On the Content tab, I can give the quiz a title, subtitle. The description is something that people will see before they start the quiz. Description, maybe directions, what they need to do. The sequence is the sequence that it is in the lesson folder. So it's that this will be the 10th content item down in the folder. So if I wanted, which means it will be displaying at the bottom of that list of content in that area, if I wanted to automatically make it, say, the second item or the third, I could do that while I'm setting it up here. Access refers to how the students will access the quiz. I can track it or not track it, which would show up in the logged activity report. I can say who can view it, a certain team, a certain password, is it only available during a certain date range? I can also set security options. For instance, I might want to have the high security, which means it's only viewable from the Angel Secure browser, which would be a good idea. Similarly, I could make it available only from a certain computer using the IP filter. Those would both be good options if I wanted this to only be accessible to students in a proctoring center, say. The interaction refers to how the student will interact with the quiz. Um, will they see the questions all at one time, one at a time? Do we want to randomize questions, answers in questions, allow backtracking? Do we want to set mastery settings so that the student has a certain number of attempts, but once they get to a certain score, say, then they're cut off? Um, I can set time limits. Review is the user feedback. So what is the student going to see once they've taken the quiz? Do we want them to see only certain limited parts of the feedback, like what they got right and wrong, or what the answer was, or what what remarks the grader has? You can also set, do I want the feedback to become available after a certain amount of time, or after a certain amount of time after the assessment is no longer available? Lots of different options there with review. I can also have people get their feedback question by question too, or wait until the end. Just as far as the automation goes, we'll cover actions and agents more in another lesson, but just know that you can have things automatically happen for the assessment, such as if the student passes the assessment, then they get added to a team that can see the next lesson. Or if they fail the assessment a certain number of times, they get locked out of it and an email goes to a tutor or a proctor or something. Um, Lots of options there, and we'll cover that in more detail. Similarly, we'll get to the gradebook in another lesson, but just know that you can set your milestone and gradebook settings as you go. Some people prefer to put their gradebook together all at one time. Other people, as they're building their lesson content item by item, will also set the gradebook settings for it. So that is almost all we're going to cover here. Let's give it a name, and we'll leave everything else as the default settings and hit save. Okay, so now that I'm actually in the assessment, I can start to add questions. Again, if you're familiar with quizzes, this should look somewhat familiar, but a little different. Now I can add a question. I can add, choose the question type, whether it's multiple choice or true, false, that sort of thing. I can also copy from other sources. So maybe I have another assessment already built in the course, or I want to use questions from a question bank. Again, we'll cover the question bank more in another lesson, but just know that you can, as you add questions to assessments, they get added to the question bank, and you can pull those later. You can also add questions to your question bank and then go into your assessment and pull them from the question bank. Um, so two ways that questions get added to question banks, either as you create them one by one in the quiz or the assessment, or if you just add them right straight to the bank from the Manage tab. Anyway, some particular question types to call your attention to. An offline item is maybe you want to have a manually graded item. It's sort of a placeholder for something that's happened outside of Angel. So maybe the assessment is that the student takes 10 true, false, and multiple choice questions in Angel, and then they verbally answer a question in an interview, and you want to give them a score for that interview. You could add that in with this placeholder. The algorithmic question is new to assessments. We didn't have these in quizzes. It's pretty cool. It lets you establish variables. So if I want to have a variable that is a continuous range of numbers, say from 7 to 12, and give it a name, and then in my question text saying, if a man is in a canoe traveling at variable, and so is variable 2, distance away and traveling at, so that each student gets essentially a different question every time they take the test, because the variable values will change. And you can do quite a bit with that. It's pretty clever. So to create a question, I click on the question type. I'll give the question I could give it a title, which is different from the actual question text, but in this case, I'll just give it a question text here. And now I can specify the number of points possible for the question. I can say whether it's true or false. It's true. I can give some feedback. And I can add keywords in. The thing with keywords is in difficulty, I might want to set these now so that later down the road, I'm going to pull this question into an assessment based on keywords. Maybe I want to have a keyword called celestial, and be able to in the future say, I want 5 questions to do with celestial bodies. And I'm going to make this a very easy question. All right. So see, now I put in the value of 10 points, and because I have had no questions added to this assessment yet, it's telling me that this particular 10 points is equal to 100% of the points possible for this assessment, which is a nice little feature that's new to assessments that lets you, as you're building your assessment, lets you keep an eye on how many points you've added. I can also give correct feedback, incorrect and correct feedback. And if I hit save. Now if I wanted to, I could hit save and then I'm going to be backed into the assessment, or I could hit save and create another. So if I'm just creating question after question, I don't have to go back in and then hit, add content and then add a true false again. I could just keep on adding them. But for now, I'll just add this one question. And then hit save. I'm done. Now if I go and I look here, I'll see the assessment example, and it has one question. Anyway, so different questions I can add. I can also, once I have questions in my assessment, I can move them around or configure what order I want them to be. So now that I'm back in the assessment, I can go about adding more questions to it, or I could preview it. I can also look at the at-a-glance settings, which are new to assessments, that tells me just sort of general information about this assessment. How many questions, what types they are, when it's available. So basically the same type of information that I could get by going through the settings, but all on one screen here, so a little easier to get a look at how this assessment is put together. If I preview it, I see it as a student would see it. So if I click choice here, I'll hit false, done. And it just takes me back out of the preview at that point. That is assessments at a glance.